In the wake of the Second World War, a new conflict emerged, one that would shape the latter half of the 20th century, the Cold War. The Cold War, a term coined by George Orwell, was an ideological battle, a clash of two diametrically opposed systems, capitalism and communism. This was not merely a war of weapons and military might, it was a war of ideas, values and ways of life. It was a struggle for the hearts and minds of the world's people. On one side stood the United States, a beacon of capitalism and democracy, leading what came to be known as the Western Bloc. This group of nations believed in free markets, individual freedoms, and democratic governance. They championed an economic system where private individuals or businesses owned capital goods, production was guided and income distributed largely through the operation of markets. On the other side stood the Soviet Union, the vanguard of communism at the helm of the Eastern Bloc. This group of nations espoused a different vision for the world, one of state ownership and planned economies. They advocated for a society where property and the distribution of wealth were controlled by the state in a bid to achieve social and economic equality. The world was split into these two spheres of influence, each trying to outdo the other, each trying to spread its way of life across the globe. The tension was palpable, the stakes were high, and the world watched on, waiting for a spark that could ignite a full-scale war. But this was a different kind of war, a Cold War. There were no grand battles, no clear victors or vanquished. Instead, there were proxy wars, clandestine operations, economic sanctions, diplomatic standoffs, and a race for technological dominance. This ideological battle, this Cold War, gave birth to a physical symbol of division, the Berlin Wall. A wall that would come to embody the tension, the division, and the very essence of this era. A wall that would stand for nearly 3 decades as a stark reminder of a world divided. In the heart of Europe, a city was literally split in two. Welcome to Berlin in the early 1960s. Let's take a step back to the dawn of the 60s, when the world was caught in a fierce ideological tug-of-war. The epicenter of this struggle, Berlin, was a city divided not just by ideologies, but by a very tangible, very real wall. But why was the Berlin Wall erected in the first place? The answer lies in the mass exodus of people from East to West Berlin. In the years following World War II, Germany was split into 4 zones, each controlled by one of the victorious powers: the United States, Great Britain, France, and the Soviet Union. Berlin, though deep within the Soviet zone, was also divided between these 4 powers. The western part of the city became an island of capitalism in a sea of Soviet-controlled territory. By the early 60s, the difference in living standards between East and West Berlin was stark. The West was prosperous and free, while the East was impoverished and under the thumb of the Soviet regime. This disparity led to a mass emigration from East to West Berlin. Frustrated by the lack of opportunities and the stifling political climate, hundreds of thousands of East Germans packed their bags and headed for the promise of a better life in the West. This exodus was a major embarrassment for the Soviet Union. It undermined their claims of a socialist paradise in the East and threatened the stability of the East German state. In response, the East German government, with the backing of the Soviet Union, took a drastic step. On August 13, 1961, they began the construction of what they called the Anti-Fascist Protection Rampart. But the world knew it as the Berlin Wall. Overnight, families were torn apart, friends were separated, and a city was divided. The wall became a symbol of the Cold War, a physical manifestation of the ideological divide that had split the world in two. And so the Berlin Wall stood, a concrete representation of the Cold War's divisions. For nearly 3 decades, the Berlin Wall was more than a barrier, it was a way of life. Imagining life behind the Berlin Wall is like peering into a world where time stood still, where every aspect of existence was under the watchful eye of the state. In East Berlin, under the stern hand of communist rule, life was vastly different from that in the West. The city was shrouded in a cloak of austerity, a stark contrast to the vibrant and bustling West Berlin. The streets were void of the grandeur and the hustle that once defined them. Instead, they echoed with the heavy boots of the Stasi, the secret police that had become an omnipresent spectre in the lives of the East Berliners. The Stasi, with its network of informants that permeated every corner of society, was the embodiment of the state's stranglehold on civil liberties. With their eyes and ears everywhere, they fostered an atmosphere of constant suspicion and fear. Private conversations became public knowledge, personal liberties were curtailed, and freedom of speech became a distant memory. East Berliners were prisoners trapped not just by the physical barrier of the wall, but by the invisible chains of oppression and fear. Yet in the face of such adversity, the human spirit proved resilient. East Berliners found ways to endure, to adapt, to carve out moments of joy amidst the gloom. They held onto their culture, their identity, and their dreams of a better future. They developed a unique brand of gallows humor, a testament to their indomitable spirit. Life behind the wall was not easy. It was a world filled with shadows and whispers, with watchful eyes and hushed voices. It was a world where freedom was a luxury, a dream tantalizingly out of reach. Yet, as the years passed, winds of change began to blow across the Eastern Bloc. The wall, once a symbol of division and oppression, would soon become a symbol of hope, a testament to the indomitable spirit of the people it once sought to imprison. The year 1989 marked the beginning of the end for the Berlin Wall. The political landscape of the Eastern Bloc was undergoing seismic shifts. The winds of change were blowing, and they carried with them the seeds of freedom. There was a growing sense of discontent among the populace, an undercurrent of dissatisfaction that was starting to surface. Mikhail Gorbachev, the General Secretary of the Soviet Union, had introduced policies of glasnost and perestroika, openness and restructuring. These policies were intended to revamp the stagnant Soviet economy. But they also inadvertently sparked a desire for political and social change in other Eastern Bloc countries. In East Germany, the discontent bubbled over into peaceful protests. Thousands of people took to the streets, their voices echoing through the air, demanding freedom, demanding change. Their cries for freedom and no more wall reverberated off the very barrier that symbolized their oppression. Meanwhile, in the upper echelons of East German politics, confusion was rife. There was talk of loosening travel restrictions, of allowing greater freedom of movement. But in a classic case of political miscommunication, the message got muddled. On November 9th, during a press conference, an East German official named Günter Schabowski announced that East Germans would be allowed to cross the border with immediate effect. His announcement was a mistake. The policy was supposed to be announced the next day, and it required a visa application process. But it was too late. The news spread like wildfire. People flocked to the checkpoints at the wall, demanding to be let through. The border guards, unsure of how to respond, eventually gave in to the pressure. And so it was, in the face of peaceful protest and political blunders, the gates were opened. The Berlin Wall, the symbol of division and oppression, was being torn down. People were dancing on top of it, chipping away chunks as souvenirs. It was a moment of jubilation, of unity, of freedom. On November 9th, 1989, the Berlin Wall fell, marking the end of an era. Hello and welcome back. Hope all is well. Happy New Year. Today, we take a look at the Berlin Wall. The fall of the Berlin Wall sparked a series of events that would reshape the world. A physical and ideological barrier was torn down, paving the way for a new era of unity and hope. This momentous event did not simply mark the end of the Berlin Wall, it signaled the end of the Cold War, an era that had held the world in a tense grip for more than 4 decades. The wall's collapse ushered in the reunification of Germany, a nation that had been divided, like its capital, by the bitter realities of the Cold War. On October 3, 1990, less than a year after the wall fell, East and West Germany were officially reunified, bringing together a people who had been separated by ideology, politics and concrete for over 40 years. Yet, the aftermath of the wall's fall extended far beyond the borders of Germany. It heralded the end of an era of division and the beginning of a new epoch marked by the dissolution of the Soviet Union and the emergence of a new world order. It was a time of change, of hope and of uncertainty. But what of the legacy of the wall itself? Today, the Berlin Wall is remembered not as a symbol of division, but as a symbol of the struggle for freedom. It stands as a testament to the human spirit's yearning for liberty, for unity, and for a world unmarred by the scars of division. Indeed, the remnants of the wall, whether in the form of graffiti-adorned slabs or preserved sections like the East Side Gallery, serve as powerful reminders of a past that should not be forgotten. They bear witness to a time when a city, a country, and indeed the world were split in two. The Berlin Wall, once a symbol of division, now serves as a reminder of the human spirit's desire for freedom and unity. It is a stark testament to our shared history, a poignant echo of a past era, and a hopeful beacon for a future where walls are torn down, not built up. Thanks for stopping by. I will see you again next time.